My name is Amber Jones, and I teach sophomore health and our child development elective courses at North Medford High School.
I'm Susan Moen. I'm the Executive Director of the Jackson County Sexual Assault Response Team. We do direct service to sexual assault survivors in Jackson County, but we also have a prevention program that does kindergarten through 12th grade education around gender violence and healthy and unhealthy relationships.
And I'm Kyndra Laughery. I'm the Prevention Program Coordinator for Jackson County Sexual Assault Response Team.
Good evening. My name is Nancy McKinnis. Buenas noches. And I work for Jackson County Public Health. And what I do is I provide direct services to the schools and students or after-school programs on programming supporting healthy sexuality.
I'm Tammy Pitson. I'm the Executive Director of the Children's Advocacy Center in Jackson County, and we provide services to children who have experienced abuse or witnessed violent crimes, and a whole other host of advocacy and support services.
So our hope this evening is that you will leave here with some optimism and some confidence in communicating with your own children about sexuality. And to that end, we're going to start with Amber Jones. Each one of these experts will have an opportunity, about 10 minutes or so, to share some content with you. And like I said, at the end of their remarks, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions as well.
Okay, I'll go ahead and stand up. And hopefully I don't talk too loud. I'm used to talking super loud in my classroom, so if I'm blowing your ears out, let me know. First of all, thank you for being here tonight. I am very passionate about what I do, teaching health and our child development elective courses, which of course we know is directly tied to sexual health as well. And it is a great opportunity to be able to share with you a little bit about what we do at the high school level when it comes to health education. And so please feel free, like Michelle said, if you have questions during our question and answer time about curriculum or things like that, please feel free to ask, but I will also share with you some resources that you can access outside of tonight that will help you understand more about the state standards when it comes to sexual health education. So that's kind of where I wanted to start this evening. If you picked up a packet on the way in, or if you didn't, they're right on the table outside here, and we can grab some and pass them around. But the Parent Academy packet has some resources in it that I kind of want to cover with you and just give you an overview, if you will, of what we are teaching in our sexual health units in high school education, sex ed, or health education. So the first thing I want to point out to you is on page 8. These are some website resources that you could access if you are interested. The first one I listed there was the Oregon Department of Education, because that is where you can find all of the state health standards. So for health across the board, K through 12, you can look at all the standards. Of course, tonight I'm kind of focused, or the expert, if you will, on the high school health standards. So that's kind of where I will be coming from with my information tonight. But you can access all of those state health standards. Sometimes they call them performance indicators. You can also see them on students' report cards. You can see some of our big reporting standards. So sexual health will be one of those reporting standards. And that's just a great place. For high school health, there are 144 health standards to be covered in 1 year. So that's a semester of sophomore health and a semester of senior health. So that, and at South, I believe it's sophomores and juniors. So we're just a little bit different there. We're actually working on our new state health standards, because those are a 2016 update. And so we are in the process of adopting curriculum. and looking at any little tweaks or adjustments that we need to make between north and south and just district-wide, keeping it very consistent with what we teach. So the North and South Health teachers have a great working relationship. We have had the opportunity of getting together several times a year to work on curriculum, to align with the state standards, to share ideas, and so that's been really powerful to have each other as support and as idea makers, because that's where the best teachers come from, stealing things, if you didn't know that. So those health standards you can check out there. So there are a lot of health standards, and when you look, I think you'll be surprised to see how many are associated with sexual health. There's a big chunk of the health standards that are associated with everything from reproductive health to understanding healthy relationships to some of the new Senate bills and laws that Kyndra and Susan will talk about with sexual assault and consent and things like that. So that's a great place to start if you want to see where we are basing our curriculum and learning targets, where we are attaching those, if you will. The next website is the American Sexual Health Association. So this is a great website that offers information on sexual health for teens and young adults. And it's a comprehensive website, talks about STIs, healthy relationships, dating violence. So a lot of the topics we talk and teach are also linked with websites. And that's one thing I know as a teacher I try to give. If I'm giving resources to my students, I want them to have useful, factual, good information, because we know sometimes that information will come from friends or media or places that there's not a lot of basis for good information or facts. Love is Respect is a great website. We use that in our Healthy Relationships unit at North Medford, and I know the South Medford teachers have also accessed. They have some different surveys and things. Am I a good boyfriend or girlfriend, or do I have healthy relationships, or what is a healthy relationship? So all kinds of kind of questionnaires or bits of information around what a healthy relationship looks like, because that's a big focus with sexual assault and domestic violence and violent relationships. We really want to bring about an awareness of what is a healthy relationship. What does that look like? Because we know that not every child is coming from a home that demonstrates that. So we want to provide some of that basis and information for them to really understand what a healthy relationship is. So, and each of these has some information under them too, kind of about the website for you. The healthyteens.org is a great one for elementary through high school students. It's a great one for parents to access, for students to access, and it's very developmentally appropriate for different age levels. So me personally, I have a 2nd grader and a 7th grader. So we talk about a lot of different things, and being a health teacher, of course, you always have the interesting dinner conversations. So it's fun, though, because I love to hear their questions, and I really want to validate their questions on an age-appropriate level. So I think some parents are like, when can you talk about those things? Because I know for me, we went to the library, the public library, we got a book, we looked at this book, we talked to my mom about what puberty was, and my sister and I pointed and giggled at the little pictures, and that was kind of it. And now being a health teacher, I see a whole new horizon, if you will, with communicating with children of any age about healthy relationships and sexual health and reproduction and things like that. So I love that Healthy Teens, and I encourage my students to visit websites like this if they have questions, and it's everything health. So it's not just sexual health, but it's all nutrition and fitness and safety, so it's a great all-inclusive website. And then the last one, since it's kind of dealing with our talk tonight, is Healthy Children, How to Talk to Your Kids About Sex. And there's kind of 5 things to remember. So I think as a parent, as a teacher, as a grandparent, any influence that you have in a child's life, they may come to you with these questions. It might not be mom and dad, it might be grandma, it might be auntie, it might be somebody else that they feel comfortable asking. And so I think it's great to know that it's okay to talk about these things. I mean, the first thing it says, talk early and often. So I think that that's important. If they have questions, we can answer those in age-appropriate ways, whether they're a kindergartner or a senior in high school getting ready to take those next steps in life toward adulthood. So it does say, too, be ready to answer questions. And I think sometimes we fear that we won't have those answers, and that's okay. It's okay to say, I don't know, but let's find out together. So I think that just those tips are really good. It talks about listening carefully, being honest about how you feel. So just kind of the tips that we probably, as parents or anybody associated with children, probably kind of know. Yeah, we should listen and we should talk honestly. But I think they're good reminders in the moment. So those are the websites that I forwarded on to Michelle. And then the pages before that, so pages 6 and 7, were some great talking points. They're just quick bulleted points, so it's a nice quick reference I tried to make on talking to your child about sex. And I love the first bit. It just says, our children live in a highly sexualized society. When I teach human sexuality in health class, I tell my students that. I say, you know, we're exposed to a lot. Through media, through social media, through magazine covers. We just finished a little unit on body types and body image, and we talked about how that's influenced. But the moment you want to talk about those things, everybody thinks, oh, we shouldn't talk about that. But research proves if we can talk about that, if we can teach that, if we can have that open line of communication, students are making healthier choices. And so that's what we really want to do, is educate them and give them a foundation for them to base their decisions off of. We're not telling them what's right or wrong or good or bad. That's where the parent comes in. That's that partnership between the student and the parent and the teacher. Because the school is not going to teach your family values and morals and beliefs. You know, that's where the parents need to step in. That family support comes in. The parents are giving these students tools and tips and knowledge and facts around sexual health for them to make their decisions off of. So it's really laying a foundational piece for that student when they then are deciding or are weighing the pros and cons, looking at the benefits and consequences, that they can use that. And that's what I said, you can have it and not use it, or you can learn it in class and then put it to work for you. So it talks all about these types of things in here. So it really just talks about behaviors, understanding that we need to teach before children are really even exposed to things. Kindergarten, people think, why should we teach sexual health in kindergarten? But that's when it should start, you know, understanding good touches and bad touches, and it's kind of the stranger danger thing. You know, we can start then so they feel comfortable talking, so we've had these open lines of communication, and we can continue supporting them in the years that they might not want to talk about these things. So I would encourage you to look through these bullet points. This is not the end-all, say-all. These are just some great quick references and tips and ideas. If you are struggling with that conversation or needing a little bit more support with that, and again, I'm happy during our question and answer time to share a little bit more with you about what our actual topics are that we're teaching in health. So I think that that's kind of where I'll go with that for now, and then I'll answer some questions if that is the case.
So I wanted to do a quick overview of a Senate bill that was passed 2 years ago. It's Senate Bill 856, and it's called Aaron's Law. And what Aaron's Law brought to Oregon is a mandate that schools provide sex abuse prevention education in every single grade, kindergarten through 12th grade, 4 sessions every grade every year. And so taking a look at what those classes would look like, we combined what we know about violence prevention education with the state standards around health that Amber was mentioning. and the broader idea of prevention as being, as healthy sexuality being part of prevention of sex abuse. And so we took those concepts and created curriculum for kindergarten through 12th graders. So that is coming into every school every year. And the idea of the program is that 1 year builds on the next, builds on the next. And I would say a couple of the primary ideas in our education that we're doing is, one of them is getting children comfortable talking about these issues, talking about boundaries, talking about consent. So in the little grades, consent is around things like saying yes or no to a hug or to playing with a friend. So it's not that we're talking about sex per se in those early grades. It's bringing up ideas that are precursors to the conversations more specifically around healthy relationships and consent around sexual activity in the much later grades. So that idea of creating building blocks. And I think that the largest component of that is that idea of kids talking to safe adults in their lives, and also discussions about keeping secrets and, and being a good friend and things like that. The statistics around child sex abuse are pretty frightening. It's considered an epidemic. The statistics are that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused before the age of 18. And so that is a very real situation that we are trying to fight against. And I think, so there's a handout at the table at the front that is titled Jackson County SART Prevention Program. And inside of that handout, we have an overview of every grade, what the basic topics for each grade are that we address, and then we also list the health standards that those address, so you can see how they're aligned with the state health standards. And I think an important piece to understand in this prevention program is that in the beginning we are talking about risk reduction, and we're talking about how can we encourage children to talk, but also identify safe people and report or disclose if things are happening. But over the course of the 12 years that we're working on this, we're moving the conversation to the idea of what is called primary prevention, which is that prevention of violence and gender violence is not just how to keep yourself from being harmed. A lot of it starts to center around culture change. Looking at our culture and saying what are the aspects of our culture, and some of the things that Amber talked about, objectification, sexualization in media, things like that. So what are the elements of our culture that actually kind of promote this prevalence of sexual violence? And what is it that is preventing people from taking concrete actions to stop it from happening? And ultimately our goal is to teach the kids that they can actually be agents of change. They are going to be the ones who can change their environment and make it safer. And that can be things like calling people out when they're making rape jokes, or when they're blaming victims, or learning how to understand how we treat victims and perpetrators in our community. So it really is, ultimately, the goal is these kids are going to be the active agents of change, so that they're going to be making the positive outcomes, and hopefully they're going to be the ones who are getting those numbers down in their lifetime.
So I'm going to kind of piggyback on this. Excuse me. I'm trying not to get a cold. Piggyback on what Susan was saying is that we are looking at these sort of things that are supporting a culture that sort of has a low tolerance, or a high tolerance, I get it mixed up, a high tolerance for violence. There's a lot that we sort of accept as inevitable in our culture. And so we talk about that and look at it and say we can change this. And one of the things we look at is we look at gender. We look at the way that we sort of give boys a script and girls a script. And we look at some of those gender roles and how they can be kind of harmful if you think of male, like what it means to be a man in our culture. It's a lot about dominance and sexual conquest and, being in control and not taking no for an answer. And then to be a woman in our culture, it is to be submissive and to be, do basically what, your man says and be that sort of damsel in distress and always be nice and never speak and stay quiet and never be always smiling, basically, So this idea of we try to sort of break those boxes of gender down because it's a big part of what we do. And we have sort of a connection too with, I also work with Lotus Rising Project, which is an organization here that supports LGBTQ youth, that's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer youth. And part of that is also in this realm of what is supporting violence in our culture. And when people are afraid of a group of people and they don't understand it and they make it okay to harm those people or to make fun of those people, we sort of, again, we raise our tolerance for violence and we turn our head away from it, and then people are harmed. So it's really important for us to get empathy with these, to help these children sort of exercise their empathy muscle, to understand that, what we think it is to be a boy in our culture and what we think it is to be a girl is actually kind of harmful. I spend a lot of time really talking specifically about how it's harmful for men. We talk a lot about how in our culture, we sort of have this idea that men aren't allowed to be emotional except for anger, right? And how that can be really distressing for men in general, not even what they do, what sort of harm happens to women based on, oh gosh, I'm getting into it. I feel like I'm going down a rabbit hole. You got to come sit through one of our lessons. You'll get it. But this idea of, most perpetrators in our culture, most often when this crime happens, it is a man that commits this crime. So that's why we're sort of trying to talk about that and understand why. It's a very small portion of men in our culture. So we talk about what is it that the, well-meaning men are a much larger portion of our culture, and why is it that this small portion of men are getting away with harming so many people in our culture without anyone saying anything. I mean, right now we have a really wonderful case happening nationally with Harvey Weinstein to talk about how we can talk about there were people in his circle that knew the kind of person he was, but they didn't say anything. And why is that? We talk about power, we talk about entitlement, and we talk about breaking those barriers down. We also talk about if you're a person in power, we go and talk to football players, and as you probably have picked up, football players and sports get a lot of bad rap when it comes to sexual violence and domestic violence. So when we go talk to football players, we say, you are in a place of power. You have a lot of social power in your schools, and you can decide to change the way people view you. You can take that power and do good. You can take that power and speak up for people and be a good person and be an example for people who are looking up to you. So we're really trying to empower the youth to understand that they are part of this culture and that they're the ones that are going to change it. And part of that can feel scary for parents because we might be saying things and they might come home with ideas that maybe challenge some really old ideas that we have in our culture about certain things, specifically gender, specifically sexual orientation. And I understand, it's really scary. However, it's causing a lot of harm when we hold on to that fear, and then some people are targeted and some people are harmed, and then people turn their heads away to that, and then we accept it, and then we're still stuck with this 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys, for years and years and years. So we have a lot of resources out there. You can always reach out to us and talk to us about our curriculum. We're happy to answer questions. We try to offer support to parents when we're doing our lessons. We try to make sure that something's going to go home to parents so that you can continue the conversation at home. I have some articles out on the back table when you leave if you want to grab one. This is the case for starting education in kindergarten. So this talks about why is it important that we do this, and what are the benefits from that. And then, sorry. This one right here, this has a lot more resources here too of how to talk to teens. It also has information on how to talk to young children, as well as, and then I also have this out here. This is a 31 days of prevention. You never once mentioned the word sex in this, but it helps. There's a lot of different activities that you can practice consent. Like Susan was saying, we're trying to create a consent culture rather than a culture where people try to egg people on or pressure people to do things, which is, coercion. So practicing consent, helping children find their uh-oh feeling, that feeling of like, oh, something's wrong, I need to talk to somebody about this, getting them to trust that. So there's a lot of activities in there to help you do that, and a lot of websites. It's fun stuff, like dance around and celebrate your body and be like, yeah, I'm in control of my body, and, have fun with that. This doesn't have to be like, we're going to have a really scary conversation right now. You can just have fun. Tell them they're in charge of their body. Let them know you're an askable adult. Let them know that you're there to listen to them, and they can come to you with anything, and you're not going to lose your mind. You're going to be able to be there and help them figure out whatever it is they're going through. And I guarantee, I have teenagers, so I have a 20-year-old. I've been through it, so I can guarantee they will. It's scary sometimes, but just keeping that line of communication open always. They will come to you. Sometimes you're like, oh, okay, I did want to hear that. Okay, no, yes, I'm glad you're talking to me. So I think that's, yeah. Oh.
Good evening again. My name is Nancy McKinnis, and I have the privilege of working for Jackson County Public Health. And one of the things that we do at our public health office is that we really try to plan, coordinate, and provide services to protect our community and to allow our community and serve our community so we can be healthy. And sometimes the topic of healthy sexuality comes up, and when it comes up, sometimes we tend to be kind of scared because maybe we have our own biases of what healthy sexuality is or what sex is. And what we really like to do is we love to promote that sexuality is such a normal, natural part of the human development. And we really want to release or try to talk about these topics in a way that it's going to be healthy and it's going to be beautiful for youth, and to try to remove that stigma of fear and rebellion and retaliation that if we ever talk to it, it's a big no-no topic. So I have had the wonderful pleasure of working at all kinds of different school districts. I've had the pleasure of working with these lovely ladies that are really doing an amazing job to really provide great education and opportunities and choice for the youth that we serve. And that to me is really exciting. Part of the things that we do at the county is that we have 3 different curriculums. And in our curriculums, we really strive to support the Oregon Health Education Standards. So we have chosen curriculums specifically that meet the needs of those health standards that are newer and the ones that will be updated here in September of 2018. So our curriculums really are comprehensive. They're age appropriate, they're evidence-based, they're medically accurate, and they're culturally competent, which is really, really exciting. And most importantly, I think it's that we really strive to make our curriculums be positive youth. We really focus on the positive youth development. So again, removing those fears and really focusing on healthy decision making instead of this fear or shame-based approach, which we know it doesn't work. And I know as a parent, as Kyndra mentioned, that can be really, really scary. So one of the things that I'm really happy that we're able to do is that we provide classes for parents, and we provide like preview sessions so parents know what it is that we're talking to or what we're talking about with youth. And that has been really helpful and very well received, because then again, we remove this fear of, oh my goodness, what are they telling my kid? And we really talk about what is healthy information, what are some options, what are the statistics that we face here in Jackson County. So one of the things that we do at the county is that we look at a lot of data, and one of the data that we get is from the Oregon Healthy Teen Survey, which is a survey that schools are required to take or can participate. I apologize for saying that. Schools can participate in. And one of the things that we have realized is that about 10% of our 8th graders are sexually active, which I like your face, like, oh my goodness, that's a big number. And when I'm at the middle schools and I say that number, the interesting thing about that is that kids go, what? I thought it was more. I know all these kids that are having sex. And while maybe they do hear of a lot of kids having sex, this is the data that we have. So this could be underrepresented, but these are the hard numbers that we have. And the interesting thing is, by the time that they reach their junior year, about 50% of the youth are sexually active. So what is it that we're going to do? So I love the approach that schools such as the Medford School District has done with great leadership. They've really tried to do the best that they can by providing education and resources to give youth a choice, to give youth information so they can make healthy decisions. And again, at the end of the day, it is the youth's decision. We as parents, we tell our kids, do this, don't do that, but then they make choices. Just like we made choices when we were young people. And some of those choices were great, and some of those didn't work out too well for us. But one of the things the reason why we were able to get a grant and were able to have different curriculums to support our youth is because of the teen pregnancy rates that we have here in our county. The good news is that those teen pregnancy rates are dropping. So good job, parents, and good job, schools, and great job to the students, because they're really doing, they're the ones that are making those decisions. But one of the things is that we're also providing opportunities for youth to learn, which is exciting. It's really, really exciting. And when we provide these opportunities, then we're entrusting youth to make healthy decisions, which again, sometimes it can be a really scary thing as a parent, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna cross my fingers and really hope that you do the right thing. But again, we want to support our youth, we don't want to scare our youth, but we also want to be realistic. So this is a really interesting statistic. About 30% of the youth that drop out of high school, they cite dropping out due to teen pregnancy. Teen pregnancy can be a really scary thing. What am I going to do? Who's going to take care of my baby? I can't take care of the baby and go to school, and I have, relationship issues. And so we want to do the work before that. We want to really support youth in giving them good, medically accurate information, not just scare tactics, which I know as a parent we want to do, but let's try to abstain from that. Let's talk about abstinence with parents as well. Abstain from fear tactics. So the other exciting thing about our curriculums is that we don't just support youth having sex. We also support youth making that decision not to have sex. So I know that sometimes that comes up, like, are you telling my kid to go have sex? Or if you talk about sex, then you're encouraging youth to have sex. We do not encourage youth to have sex, but we really do give them an opportunity to take ownership of their decisions. We want to entrust them. Something that I say to the kids all the time, which is kind of funny and silly, is that I talk about, is it Spider-Man? Gosh, now I'm gonna forget. It's Spider-Man when the grandma or the grandpa is like dying on the floor, and he tells Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. So I always stress that to youth. They do have a lot of responsibility, and they have the power of choice. So how can we encourage them to make healthy decisions? Again, our pregnancy stats is what allowed Jackson County to be able to get a grant to really promote education so we can drive those numbers down. And again, those numbers have been going down, which is really, really exciting. And then we also want to support the Oregon Department of Education and the things that they state and the things that we know that work. So for example, Oregon law requires elementary and secondary schools to provide comprehensive sexuality and education. And comprehensive meaning that we're talking about abstinence as well as we're talking about methods of contraception. And I know that sometimes it's easier to say, well, we'll just promote abstinence. But when we're doing that, we're not providing equitable services to the youth who are sexually active. So we want to be able to reach everyone and provide services for everyone, for those that are choosing to have sex and for those who are choosing to abstain, which means we provide support to all. We give them resources, we give them tools, and we do that in fun learning activities. I think they're fun. The students think they're fun. Sometimes they're like, lady, I don't want to talk about this. But we know that it works. And then comprehensive sexuality education gets results. Again, those teen pregnancy rates go down because we talk about methods of contraception. If you're choosing to have sex, let's talk about how you can be safe so you can really reach the goals and desires that you have. What are the goals that you have? You all have goals for your kids. So we really want to encourage those goals by providing prevention techniques. We know that comprehensive sex ed empowers young people, and we also know that it does not encourage sex. Studies show that when people really promote comprehensive sex ed, that those teen pregnancy rates go way down. But besides that, when youth start to have sex, it's later in life. So again, we really want to promote positive behaviors. In our Healthy Sexuality series, we really touch on abstinence, consent, healthy relationships, STDs, like HIV and AIDS, sexual and gender identity, values about sexual health. And again, these are not the values that we impose, but really we talk about what is it, what goes on at home? How can we support you with that? Anatomy and reproduction, negotiation skills. So if somebody doesn't want to have sex, what tools can they have so they can really practice to say, you know what, this is not what I want. This is not what I'm comfortable with, which is something that Kyndra and Susan also teach. And we also talk about birth control and sexual protection. Again, I'm really, really proud of this community and all the work that parents are doing. I'm so grateful that you guys are all here on this beautiful wet evening listening to us. So I encourage any questions, and we welcome any questions. And again, you guys are in amazing hands because these ladies are pretty wonderful.
As I said earlier, I work at the Children's Advocacy Center, and a lot of what we do, a lot of the services that we provide are after children have already been hurt, and a lot of times they've been hurt sexually because they didn't know or recognize what was happening to them was not appropriate. So I am also a mother of an 8-year-old. I've been doing child protection for 27 years, so I've worked various different roles. My husband says that makes me, that I'm going to make my son grow up knowing way too much. And I think that's a good thing, quite frankly. So I wanted to talk a little bit tonight about talking, and when do you start to talk to your child about sex and sexual things. And I started talking to my son about sexuality when he was old enough to talk back to me, so fairly young. Now, was I talking to him about sex? Not really. He was 2, and I was teaching him correct names for private parts, and I'm a big proponent of that. I used to do interviews with children from an investigative standpoint, and what I would tell you is it was really hard to figure out what kids were talking about when they were using cutesy names that didn't make any sense to me or the authorities who were trying to keep them safe. So I think you can start really early, and you can tell them and teach them the correct names of their body parts so that when that part is hurting or there's something wrong, they can communicate that very clearly to you. And I would say starting early to talk to them and talking to them frequently, but not necessarily about sex, but just about sexual things and sexual body parts, and to keep an open mind about that. One of the things that we've heard a lot about is what the schools are doing to help teach your children about choices. And I think that's really important, but I think it's also important as parents, you have values that you want to teach your children. And if you don't have the conversations with them, they are going to learn about these things from their friends. And it is not going to be accurate. And by the time that they get to where they're having the actual conversations in health class, they're going to have a lot of misconceptions that they're living with. So I would tell you, practice saying those words in the mirror before you talk to your children if it feels uncomfortable to you. but to use those correct names. I think a lot of what I have worked with parents over the years is prevention. So really reducing the risk that your child is going to be at risk for sexual abuse. We always talk to them about what happens with strangers and people that we don't know. But if we don't give them the language and we don't talk to them about these things and recognize what healthy boundaries are, we know that they're at risk from people that they know. And then they don't know that it's not right. And they don't know who to tell because they're getting all of their information from someone whose motivation is not to keep them safe. The other thing is, if we don't start having the conversations early with our children, it gets more awkward the older they get. So it gets really awkward. I'm going to tell you that I am older than I'd like to admit, but I would tell you that my parents' philosophy on this was to wait until I asked. When do you think I asked them? Never. I was in high school and my mom was like, I think it's time that we have a talk. And I didn't want any part of that. And neither did she, really, if she were honest. It becomes normal. It becomes normal for you to have these conversations if you're having them along the way. And if you're having them along the way, they know that they can talk to you about that. And if they know that they can talk to you about that, when they have questions or they have a choice to make, they're going to feel comfortable to come and talk to you. And that's really what it's about. It's about starting early to set the stage so that they come to you to talk to you about what's happening with them or what choices they might have. It's not saying, hey, we want you to go have sex. It's not saying any of those things, but it is setting up a relationship, an open communication with your child so that they feel comfortable to come and talk to you. I would also say that it opens the conversation to be able to talk to your child about touch, appropriate touch, inappropriate touch. I would say that it's really important to set some boundaries about what body parts can be touched by who. I would caution not to say that no one can touch those body parts that we consider private, because that's not necessarily true. When they go into the doctor for an exam, the doctor may, in fact, touch those parts as part of an examination if there is some concern about those parts. If they're very young and you're potty training them, you might be helping them wipe or something. So I would caution about saying no one, but again, if you have the conversation and you set the context, then I think it's really important. I think another really important thing is to empower your child to say no, no matter who or what. My mom, I have the only grandchild on my side of the family. He is a king. But my mother, I can remember her coming and visiting when he was 2.5, and wanting hugs and kisses because that's what grandmas do. And he wasn't having any part of it. And so then she was trying to talk him into it. And I had to stand up and kind of say, oh, no, James gets to say no to anyone at any time about anything involving his body. It kind of hurt my mother's feelings, I will say. But we had a conversation after, not in front of my child, to explain that. And once I explained why that was, so if he can say no to Gammy, then he can say no to somebody else. If he can say no to me, then he can say no to somebody else. So I think that's really part of the conversation to have with your child, is about who, when, how, and when they can say no. Because if they feel empowered to say no and something happens, they will come and tell you if something happens a lot of the time, most of the time. I think it's important when you're talking about trying to set the stage with your child, to really talk about, and it talks in older kids, it's about those relationship manipulations. But with younger kids, it's about maybe the language you use is people try to trick you into. What are some scenarios? And I think you have to take the learning opportunities, the teaching moments that present itself. So it becomes kind of uncomfortable, but when it's presented, if something happens, then you talk about it. If there's something, I try to shield as much of the news and stuff from my son. He's 8. He has heard the Hollywood stuff that's happening right now. And when he asks me about it, we stop and we talk about it. I use 8-year-old words and not adult words. But I think it's important. You're going to be, unfortunately, presented with a lot of opportunities at each age and each development, stage of development, because of what happens in the world every day. And I think you take those opportunities to do that. And I do think you talk about it I think somebody said often, frequently. You talk about it as much as you can, so that it isn't this strange thing that happens. They turn 16, something's happened to them because they were at some party and they don't have anybody to talk to. The other thing is to remember, going kind of back to that, they can say no. Really not to have them have forced any kind of contact with anyone. So if they don't want to hug somebody, don't guilt them into, but grandma's only here one time a year for 5 days. Let's give her all the hugs that she can have. And it becomes easy. It becomes easy for you because you've been having these conversations with them since you could have conversations with them. I used bath time a lot when my child was young to just openly talk about touching. There's a lot of books out there that really that cover the span from little kids all the way up to teenagers about how to have these conversations really in an age-appropriate way that fits in with your values. I think that's the one thing that I think is really important. If you're having the conversations with them and you're talking to them about values and making healthy choices, then they're going to get that information from you. If you're not having that conversation, believe me, they're having that conversation with someone. Even at 8, my child comes home with stories that people have told him, and I'm like, oh, no, that's not true. That's not how that works. So the other thing that I will tell you is there's a lot of information out there about reducing risk. So my job, the majority of my job is reacting to events of child abuse. And a lot of that, at least half of that, maybe a little more than half of that, is child sex abuse. So I really want to encourage adults, parents, aunts, grandparents, sisters, brothers, to really educate yourself around how to do that, around how to keep your kids safe. We facilitate a class through the Children's Advocacy Center using Darkness to Light's curriculum, which is a prevention. You will have an opportunity actually through this, is it through the Academy? Is it through the Academy? It's on the November 8th. It's a free class. There's a flyer on your handout. And this gives you the skills to identify and respond to child sexual abuse. What Darkness to Light, the creator of the curriculum, says, for every one adult that goes through this class and learns the steps of identifying and responding, that reduces the risk for 10 kids, and there 10 kids to be sexually abused. I use the terminology reducing the risk And I think it's important here that I kind of stop, and this is my own soapbox, and then I think I will be done. Reducing the risk, because you can do everything right and things happen. And so I don't want people to leave here thinking, if I do everything right, my child is never at risk. We need to be vigilant to being present in our child's life and to the people that are in our child's life. And we need, one of the ways we can be vigilant is taking this class and being present and talking at each opportunity that we have around appropriate healthy choices around sexual relationships. The class is on November 8th. That's going to be here, and it's available in Spanish as well. So I would really encourage you to come back to that and to bring a friend or a family member so that you have at least the language and the understanding of what the scope of the problem is and what the problem looks like. So, thank you.
So I think you've heard quite a bit about the importance of talking, about the importance of open communication, about the importance of speaking often and using medically correct terms. But I want to put the panelists on the spot for just a moment, because as a parent myself, I used a lot of books to help me have these conversations. Books like Where Did I Come From? Or What's Happening to Me? That allowed me to sit with my child and navigate some of these conversations and provide appropriate language. For young women, the American Girl series, if you're familiar with these books, The Care and Keeping of You and those types of things, are dynamite, and someone should really write them for boys. So my question to you is, in having conversations with children, what are a couple of your favorite books to use?
Of course, teaching child development too, I take these books into my high school classroom so my high schoolers can see them, but they are geared more towards children. So one of them that I have is like a National Geographic for kids, and it's called like All About Babies. And so it talks about the sperm and the egg and just the whole process from the beginning, but it's very child appropriate, developmentally appropriate, uses those words that they're going to understand, but the correct, anatomically correct words for body parts or cells or things like that. So I'd have to say that one, and then I have one that's called I Wonder. So it's wondering all about our bodies, and so it shows everything from growing pubic hair to body odor, all these things that children are going to deal with as they grow. And so you can kind of follow that age-appropriate, developmentally appropriate step with them, covering different topics. So, but I know there's so many out there.
I'm going to let Kyndra answer this one because she does the books for our prevention classes.
I know, I'm sitting here going, okay, blah, 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 blah. Okay.
Where Do I Come From is a good one.
Where do I come from? That's a good one for all of us. One that popped right into my head, it's called Squeakers, and it's actually a serendipity book. It is called Squeakers. Yep. It's about a squirrel. But it's about a squirrel. It's set in a forest. There are a lot of books out there. I've actually looked through a lot of books, and mind you, I'm trying to find books that I can bring into a classroom. So for you all, here's a couple other. The Right Touch is another really great book to talk about touch. Then there's also I Said No. That's another really good book where a young boy is sharing a story of a time that they said no, and it's just a really great conversation starter. So the book Squeakers is one that I actually take into second grade, and it is the story of a little squirrel who lives in a forest who is tricked into giving part of his tail to a Mr. Mole who also lives in the forest. It goes through the process of how this Mr. Mole is really tricky and how he really tricks Squeakers into what's happening. And what I like about it is there are a lot of books out there that really are dealing with children. There's Not in Room 204 is another one, where these children are being abused in their home. That's a lot for me personally to bring into a classroom when I only have 30 minutes. I don't want to scare children. I don't want to like, bye teachers, I'm leaving now. Have fun with the rest of your day. I want to try to make sure everyone feels okay, and this is just real matter of fact information. So that's what I like about Squeakers is it's set in it's animals, it's really safe, but you can really have a lot of great conversations about that and talk about, because at the very beginning of the book, the mom tells Squeakers, you know, respect your elders. And yes, of course you want to respect your elders, but can you all see where that can also be problematic if we're just always listening to our elders without question? And so that comes up. Also the telling, in Squeakers, the squirrel has a few days of where he feels just awful. And we talk about that when you have information in your body, how that feels so terrible and how it feels better to tell, even though it's really scary to tell. And so reading those stories and then being able to say, if you are ever in a situation like Squeakers, I'm here for you. Another great one is, I'm staying in elementary land, so I will try to brainstorm some other ones that are older, but that's where my brain is right now, is elementary. There's another one, Berenstein Bears, Strangers. I don't know the whole title, but it's a really great book that talks about how you can't tell, you know, and how you can't tell just by looking at someone who they are and what they're all about. But like Tammy said, you know, we don't want to focus always on strangers. We do want to talk about the idea that anyone could do this. So I would love to, if you are interested in books, that's one of my favorite things to do, is to find books in this realm. So please, my contact information is there. Please feel free to reach out to me and use me as a personal just resource. I need some help. Help me, what's a good book for this age group? And if I don't have it, I will hunt it down for you.
I don't necessarily have like a favorite book, but I do like the Great Body Shop series. And I know that that is really useful for youth, maybe because it comes from the school. I don't necessarily know, but I've heard parents liking that. It's not a hard read. It's like a little pamphlet of 4 to 5 pages, and it's easy. So again, and I'm really big on meeting people where they are. So what's the best way for you to learn and to get information? That's the best way that's going to work for you. And what's the best way that your youth receives information? And that's the best way it's going to work for them.
I like The Right Touch a lot. It's kind of a bedtime story kind of thing that's easy to open up a conversation. I also like, and I can't think of the whole name, but it's a series of books, and the character in its name is Gorp. Go figure. And it talks about secret touch. And it goes through, and it's really very cute, and it's not intimidating, I guess is what I would say. And it actually comes, you can buy a little Gorp. It's this little purple guy. But it goes through a scenario, and the main character's name is Pumpkin Pie, and so it goes through Pumpkin Pie's family. There's also, if you looked at the book and you liked the book, there's another book that talks about diversity and stuff as well, using the same little character, so it's kind of a series. I also brought some books just to show you. Toni Cavanaugh Johnson is kind of her wheelhouse. Her expertise is child sexuality, and she does a lot of work with that subject matter. And she wrote a book, and it's been updated recently, called Understanding Children's Sexual Behavior: What's Natural and Healthy. So a lot of times we get into this this struggle of, oh my gosh, is this normal behavior, or is this not? Is this something I need to be concerned about? Kids explore, and some of that's normal exploration, but where's the line get drawn? Toni Cavanaugh has a lot of information in her book. It's a little tiny book, but the writing is really small. People like me can't read the writing that small. So there's charts and all sorts of stuff about this is normal, this is concerning, this is what you can do kind of information.
I'm just going to say one thing quickly. I think the best advice anybody ever gave me about talking to my kids about sex was they said that you need to be prepared to talk into the silence. That most of the time your kids aren't going to come and ask you to tell them about this. There might be questions along the way, but you need to be willing to start the conversation and not be daunted if they don't give anything back. If they're sitting there going, just can we stop? Just talk into the silence, because they are listening, and parents and the folks who are taking care of them at home are hugely impactful on how they make these decisions. Sometimes they say, it's their peers who are influencing the most. We know from studies that it's actually parents' values and what the parents are talking about that most influence kids' decisions around sexual activity. So even if they don't want to talk back, just trust that they're listening to you and that you get to tell them what you believe and what you think and what you hope. And that also lets them know that it is you are constantly there to talk with them when they're ready.